professional fantasy football league players. Welcome to the Stardom Sit 'em Show for Week 7. As always, I'm your host, Josh Marton, and I am here to get you a win over halfway through the season. Playoffs are just around the corner, and hopefully you're in them. And I'm going to see what I can do to get you there today. Remember, the goal is to get you up to the next tier. You guys are professionals now. We want to get you paid for it. So if you're in Tier 3, I'm going to give you a few home run guys you can play to make sure you're in the playoffs to give you a chance to win the league. Same thing with Tier 2. Tier 1, you guys are the professionals. You guys are the where everyone else wants to be. I'm still going to give you some advice as well to make sure you can win your league and win the big money. So on today's show, I've got a couple of quarterbacks to play if you're desperate, some running back shakeups in the rankings, plus running backs who I think you should sit because the production might not be there this week. I've got wide receivers that because of injuries are higher than they usually are, plus matchups dictate them to be higher. I've got two wide receivers who I'm a little bit lower than most other experts on, but I think you should sit them this week. But first, as always, we start with the buys. In Week 7, there are 6 teams on a bye. Atlanta, Denver, Kansas City, Miami, Philadelphia, and San Diego, all on a bye this week. So, if you have guys like Matt Ryan, Roddy White, Julio Jones, Michael Turner, Tony Gonzalez, Peyton Manning, Demaryius Thomas, Eric Decker, Willis McGahee, even Ronnie Hillman, Jamal Charles, Brady Quinn for some reason, Dwayne Bowe, Ryan Tannehill, Reggie Bush, Michael Vick, Jeremy Maclin, Deshaun Jackson, Brent Selleck, LaShawn McCoy, Phillip Rivers, Ryan Matthews, Antonio Gates, Malcolm Floyd, Robert Meacham. Make sure they're out of your lineup. Now, let's get to the guys that should be in your lineup. Let's start at quarterback. First guy I want to talk to you about starting, Andrew Luck. I have him ranked 6th among quarterbacks. 6th. He cracked the top 10 finally. I believe this kid is the real deal. If you've got him in your lineup, I believe he should be starting. They're playing Cleveland this week. Cleveland gives up the 5th most fantasy points to quarterbacks. He is a must start this week. I'm going to give you guys that you should sit, and those are guys you should start him over, which it's possible that you have both of them. I think Andrew Luck's going to have a big day. Another guy I put in the top 10 this week who usually isn't there is Tony Romo. I have him 7th among quarterbacks. Last few times out, he's been a little bit disappointing. I guarantee you. He had 6 interceptions or whatever it was against Chicago. Felt like 6, right? If you're watching the game. Well, this week he's playing Carolina. Carolina is middle of the road against quarterback, but they are top 5 against running backs and top 12 against tight ends. So I think the Dallas offense is going to have success this week. I think it's a better matchup than it looks like on paper for Tony Romo, and I look for him to have a very good day this week. As always, at every position, I'll give you a couple guys if you're desperate because of the bye weeks. First guy this week is Josh Freeman at quarterback, going up against the Saints. You're going to see a theme in the rankings if you follow along on those, by the way. Those are always up at the PFFL.com, so you can follow along. If there's not a guy I mentioned on here, you can look at the rankings, and if I have him behind a guy, then that's who you should play. Follow the rankings. But you're going to see a theme in the rankings and on this show today, and that's the Saints defense. The Saints defense is bad. Josh Freeman is going to probably have a surprisingly good day. The Saints give up the 6th most points to quarterbacks, the 1st most points to running backs, and the 3rd most points to wide receivers. So look for a theme. And I think Josh Freeman's going to be able to take advantage of that. He had a nice week last week. Coming off of the bye a couple weeks ago, it looks like they were able to readjust what they were doing with him, get the run game back involved, take a little bit of pressure off of Freeman. And I think he's going to be successful. Remember, this is a guy who in 2010 had 26 interceptions or 26 touchdowns and only 6 interceptions. So the pedigree is there. I think he can be good again, and I think it starts this week. Next guy, I told you about him on the weekly waiver wire show a couple days ago if you listen to that. That's Brandon Weeden. I am all in on the Cleveland offense. I think it's finally starting to take shape and finally starting to be successful. And this week, going up against the Colts, it's a very good matchup for Weeden. And I think he's going to put something together. Look what Sanchez did against them last week. Now, granted, he had Sean Green running in most of the touchdowns. So St. Chance's fantasy day didn't look that great, but he got him down there. Green didn't have a lot of long runs. They were in the red zone, and he took advantage of it. I think Whedon takes advantage of a poor Colts secondary and gets some deep plays. Guys, I think who you should sit at quarterback this week, Joe Flacco. I have him ranked 18th going up against a Houston team that gave up all those touchdowns last week to Aaron Rodgers. So sure, do you think that Flacco can exploit that Houston defense that was so bad? Maybe. I look at it more of a Houston defense that is angry about what happened last week, especially a man named J.J. Watt. Packers put some film together about how to stop Watt from getting to the quarterback, but sometimes you can't really stop a guy like that, especially when he's angry. So I look for Flacco to have a very bad day. Next guy on the list to sit at your quarterback position breaks my heart. I have him ranked 19th among quarterbacks. That's Matthew Stafford of the Detroit Lions. Stafford had a great season last year. Threw for over 5,000 yards. Looked unstoppable. He has not looked the same this year. Now, going into the fourth quarter last week against Philadelphia, Stafford was 6 for 21 for 91 yards. In the fourth quarter, he had a great end to the game. Threw for a couple touchdowns, got them in position to win the game in overtime. The Bears' defense is even better than the Eagles' defense. The Bears' defense puts pressure on the quarterback just like the Eagles do, but they also have a better linebacking core than the Eagles, and their secondary is just as good. I think Stafford's going to struggle this week. I think it's going to be a hard game against those Chicago Bears. By the way, the Bears, number one against the quarterback in fantasy, only giving up 7.7 points per game to quarterbacks. Last year, Stafford was kind of matchup proof. I don't think he is this year. Last guy at the quarterback position who I believe should be out of your lineup this week is Alex Smith. Going up against the Seahawks, you saw what the Giants did against Alex Smith last week. That was in San Francisco. The Seahawks are 30th against the quarterback, which means they give up the 30th most points, only 11 points. Now, a lot of that is skewed because they play a lot of their games at home so far, and their defense, for whatever reason, just like their offense, seems to be better in Seattle. But Alex Smith is struggling. So while he was a top 10 play a couple weeks ago, I know I had him ranked as high as 13, maybe even 11. Not so anymore. He's 22nd this week. Get him out of your lineup. Moving on to the running back position, I told you it would be a theme. The Saints defense is really bad, so we're going to start with Doug Martin, who I have ranked 5th among running backs this week. I think he gets a touchdown, maybe even 2, against that very bad Saints defense. One of the reasons I like Josh Freeman so much is, like I said, in the bye week, I think they got back to their roots. Greg Schiano at Rutgers loved to run the ball. He wants to do the same thing in the NFL, which frees up Freeman to be better. But he's also going to run the ball more, which means Doug Martin. He's going to get some carries. He's going to get most of the carries. He's going to produce with them against the Saints. Next guy, Stephen Ridley. I have him ranked 7th going up against the Jets. The Jets are very bad against the run. They're in the top 10 of worst fantasy defenses against running backs. While it is a timeshare, it seems like, in New England, they're actually running on 49% of their snaps. So even though you're not sure who's going to get the ball, whether it's Ridley or Woodhead or Bolden, or they might even bring Sammy Morris back, who knows? But the point is, the guys that are getting the ball are all getting 14 to 15 carries apiece. Ridley's producing with it. And it's a really good matchup. Next guy on the list is Ahmad Bradshaw, going up against the Redskins. Now, on paper, this looks like a pretty bad matchup. The Redskins only give up 13 points to running backs. But Ahmad Bradshaw kind of proved to me last week that he's a little bit matchup proof. So I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt. He's 10th among my running backs. Had a really good game against San Francisco, and San Francisco is the best run defense in the league. So I think he can do it again. And I don't think it's as much of a timeshare as most people think with David Wilson, and certainly not with Andre Brown. Sticking with the running back position, we're going to Dallas. They're playing Carolina this week. Carolina gives up the 5th most points to running backs. So the next guy on my list, I'm telling you who I think could be a very nice start is Philip Tanner. That's right, not Felix Jones. If you're like me, you've been burned one too many times by Felix Jones. He is not a guy that is a number one running back. The Cowboys have already said Tanner's going to get some work. They think it's going to be 60-40 to Felix getting 60% of the work, Tanner getting 40. I say switch it once the game starts rolling. Felix is an ineffective running back. It's sad. He had a lot of hype going into last year. He had a lot of hype the year before. He's never lived up to it. So I like Philip Tanner. I have him ranked 16th among running backs. Two guys who, if you're desperate, I think you can play at your flex position or even maybe a running back too, depending on how your bye weeks look. Dale Richardson in St. Louis. That is a timeshare now. Richardson and Steven Jackson for the last 2 weeks have split the carries 50-50. And Richardson is producing. Going up against a Packers team who ranks 16th as far as points against, giving up, ironically, 16 points a game. Not a great matchup, but good enough to where I think Richardson can produce with the carries that he gets. Last guy at running back who I think might be a good start at a flex position is Mike Goodson of the Oakland Raiders. Going up against the Jaguars, good matchup. Jaguars giving up the second most points to running backs. Obviously, McFadden is a huge start this week, right? But so is Goodson. I think Goodson gets some time, gets some work in, gets some carries against that poor defense. Only 3 running backs on the list of guys you should sit this week. Mikel LeSure going up against the Bears. Pierre Thomas going up against the Buccaneers, who, by the way, have a very good run defense. The Bucs are actually 25th against the run, giving up the 25th most points at only 12 points to running backs. And lastly, William Powell, who I have ranked 30th. Look, they're going up against the Vikings, Minnesota, the best team against running backs for fantasy points, giving up only 9 points a game. Arizona continues to try to run the ball, and we're seeing a theme, whether it's Beanie Wells, Ryan Williams, William Powell, or Larod Stevens Howling. That offensive line is not built to run the ball. So don't take a chance on William Powell. Moving on to wide receivers. Guys, I think you should start Vincent Jackson. I have him ranked third in my rankings this week for wide receivers. Can you guess why? Yep, playing the Saints. Saints giving up the third most points to wide receivers. So Jackson is third. A little fitting there. Jordy Nelson. Once again, no Greg Jennings. I have him ranked 9th among wide receivers. The Rams do okay. They do really good. They give up the 31st most points to wide receivers. So did Houston, going into last week. The Green Bay Packers offense is starting to become matchup proof again, like it was last year. Up next is Kenny Britt. We have him ranked 16th, going up against Buffalo. The Bills, top 5 worst team against the wide receiver for fantasy points. So start Kenny Britt. 2 guys to play if you're desperate at wide receiver. Number 1, Mike Williams of Tampa Bay, for obvious reasons. Number 2, I told you about him on the weekly waiver wire show. That's Josh Gordon of the Cleveland Browns. I think he will get another big play for the 3rd week in a row against that suspect Colts secondary. And a bonus wide receiver, Santana Moss. I have him ranked 33rd. Maybe a flex play. I would only recommend starting him if it is ruled that Pierre Garçon is out for the game, which it looks like he will be. And if he is, Santana Moss could be a very sneaky play. Guys who I think you should sit at wide receiver this week, Torrey Smith, going up against that angry Texans defense. I have him ranked at 27th. Michael Crabtree, again, going up against the Seahawks. I have him ranked 29th. It's a bad matchup. And Brandon Lloyd, who I ranked 25th, but it actually looks like he might be a late scratch. And the thing that the Jets still do well, even though there's no Revis, they still cover the deep ball pretty well. So look for them. I would say Welker's going to have a very big day, but Lloyd might struggle. Last but not least, we move on to the tight end position. Not a lot of guys here this week. Pretty much playing the basics. Obviously, a very quick health note keep an eye on Jimmy Graham. He may not play. He didn't practice on Thursday, so he might not be playing. Obviously, if that's the case, I'll tweet it out, and I'll tell you who to look for. Remember, you can follow me on Twitter at JoshMartin33. If I see that Graham is out, I will tweet out a replacement start for him. For right now, two guys, Scott Chandler and Martellus Bennett. Both guys who early on in the year I told you, keep an eye on these guys. They're going to produce, and they did. Last few weeks, they've struggled. This week, they play the two worst defenses, respectively, against the tight ends, the Titans and the Redskins. I think these guys get looks, and I think they get a lot of them, and I think they produce. Put them in your lineup. If you got a guy like Gates on a bye, Gonzalez on a bye, these guys can start for you. Two guys who I think you should sit at the tight end position. Brandon Pettigrew, again, going up against that Bears defense. I think that entire Lions offense is going to struggle this week. And Fred Davis of the Washington Redskins. Now, here's the thing about the Giants, which is who they play. They're actually really bad against wide receivers. They're okay against running backs and quarterbacks. For whatever reason, they are very, very good against tight ends. So, I think Santana Moss could be a nice play. Even Josh Morgan, if you're really, really, really crazy desperate, which you shouldn't be that desperate. But Fred Davis is not a nice play at tight end for that very reason. It's a hard matchup. So that's our show for this week. As always, thank you for listening. Remember, again, you can follow me on Twitter at JoshMartin33. Send me any start-sit questions you have up until game time, either on Twitter or at the PFFL Facebook page. I'll answer them all the way up until 1 o'clock. Remember to listen to all the great content we have here at PFFL Radio Network. Saturday is the PFFL Live Breaking News Show. Make sure you catch that so you get all your injury updates. I'm your host, Josh Martin. Keep smiling, keep listening, and always look both ways.